Welcome back to Americans for Truth Live. I'm Pete LaBarbera, president of Americans for Truth about homosexuality. We are a pro-family group, Christian group, dedicated to answering the media's and the LGBTQ lies about the homosexual agenda, the bisexual agenda, LGBTQ. The letters keep coming. I don't know how they'll have the whole alphabet monopolized by the end of in a few more years. I'm excited to be here with my good friend. We're interviewing Stephen Black from First Stone Ministries. And Stephen is a true, I've gotten to know Stephen over the years, and he's a good friend. He's a truth warrior. He's done some amazing work. He's come out of the homosexual lifestyle, which if you missed it, that was our program Wednesday. And so Stephen, welcome to Americans for Truth Live. Welcome back as our first guest.
It's good to be back.
And I'm also on with Mike Heath, who's my good friend, and he runs Helping Hands Ministries. Mike, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Pete. Can we just get the donation thing out of the way at the top, because I'm excited about getting to Stephen's interview, the discussion with Stephen. Can I just do
okay? Get it. We're going to do it again, but hit it quick.
All right. So AmericansForTruth.com, AmericansForTruth.com, big blue donate button. Make sure you click on that donate button and make I don't know, you got $1 million lying around, we can use it. $1,000, $10. How about $10? Make a contribution today. All right, back at you, Peter.
Okay. I've got to know Stephen Black. Stephen, when did we first meet? It was at some I can't even remember. Was it at a conference for Sally Kern, a rally for Sally Kern?
It was the rally for Sally, April 2nd, and I don't remember the year. I know it was April 2nd though, because I remember it was on my dad's birthday.
Yeah, and you always say that you were in the ex-gay community, ex-gay sort of advocates, and tell the story of how a lot of times there was sort of a political correctness, and some of those guys just did not like the guys doing the culture war side like me. Tell that story about how we met and some of the things you heard, and just that whole thing.
About what now, Pete?
Oh, how there were people in the ex-gay movement who distrusted the culture warriors.
Oh, right. Absolutely. Yeah. That's a story in itself. And honestly, I would look behind the scenes on some of those people, unfortunately, misguided and not mature, still struggling in their own sexual identity and brokenness. And so they would appeal to the idea of a false compassion towards the suffering ex-gay and the suffering gay. And a lot of that mindset that was like in Exodus, and even still with some people that have come out of homosexuality, is this idea that, and no doubt I'm a pastor, and we need to, minister to souls, but a false compassion that you somehow are going to, if you speak the truth boldly or say things that like a prophetic person would boldly call something directly sin and talk about even the fear of God, then you would somehow be marginalized, and that you're not really the voice of reason and compassion. And that is actually, that kind of mentality, unfortunately, has permeated the church with this whole LGBTQ plus, the plus sign, Christianity. And the reality
isn't that a problem for all Christians, Stephen? Ever since I've been doing this issue, it seems like there's a battle between the ministry minded and the people trying to fight the sort of evil agenda in the culture. And I think a lot of Christians think, well, you can't do both. I don't know where that was written in the Bible, that you can't fight the gay agenda and also reach out with the love of Christ to people struggling. But it seems like there's always a side that says, well, you can't do that, and there's a distrust of the culture war side. And on the other hand, some of the culture warriors, that I've met over the years, they don't really understand the reaching outside. So it's not just one way. It's a sort of distrust. And I think Christians are called to both. I think Christians and pastors are called to reach out to people struggling. We don't hate anybody. We're all forgiven sinners. I mean, this idea that some gay activists think we're better than, no, we're all forgiven sinners. So we want to reach out to them like you do in your ministry. On the other hand, we want to stand against the efforts, the pro-homosexual so-called marriage efforts and this incredible agenda that's reaching school children, etc. Why can't we do both?
Well, you're really touching on something that is, I was in a meeting with some pastors yesterday, which is a maturity issue of leadership. And this is what has to be approached, that pastors first, they need to be courageous on this issue. And then because they are pastors, they have to be willing to do the hard work of discipleship. And, you know, no doubt there are some men who call themselves pastors that really are just teachers, and they're not very gifted in the area of doing discipleship counseling or actually pastoral care. Then they should have a team of people around them in their church that does a good job at doing the pastoral care, but never forsaking the message of holiness and hope, and that the grace of God brings transformation. And that's a big problem in the church. That's also with the tension that was in Exodus. Of course,
explain what is Exodus? What was Exodus?
Well, Exodus International was a network of ministries like First Stone. Actually, First Stone was one of the founding ministries in 1976, and it was pretty stable in the 80s and 90s, and in the 90s it was actually pretty stable. It was after Alan Chambers took it over in 2000, 2001, where it began to erode into a place of antinomianism and hypergrace, and bringing the idea that orientation is fixed.
But when they started, they were an ex-gay ministry. They were helping people leave the lifestyle. But by the time they got done and they were doing friendly dialogues with gay activists, by the time they were done, they were saying the whole idea of ex-gay is fallacious, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's unfortunate. Yeah, and Alan Chambers blessing gay marriage now. And
he said God was cool with gay marriage. This is a so-called Christian advocate leader, and I really feel like there's been a lot of people who've sold out the truth on this issue, Stephen. But we only have so much time, so I want to cut. First of all, Stephen, you were give the 1 minute the elevator speech testimony of your life on this issue.
Well,
so, for people who missed the last show.
Sure. 35 years ago, I had a transformative experience with Jesus Christ after crying out for 1.5 years in grief and sorrow, and he heard my cry. He delivered my soul out of a pit. I had lived gay identified for 8 years, and this was right in the middle of the AIDS crisis in 1983 here in Oklahoma City, and he delivered me from that. He told me the night I got saved, if I didn't truly surrender to him, I was going to die. I didn't know what that meant. But then later on, within 3 years, we see half the people I knew in the gay community dead. And I have been following the Lord and serving and doing ministry now for over 30 years. And I've literally seen hundreds of people surrender to Jesus and go on to live godly lives.
Okay, Stephen, I want you to tell me one of your most, I know you can't give names, of course. You've counseled many men. Is it mostly men you've counseled?
Yes, I've been, and couples.
And not just homosexuality, all forms of sexual brokenness. And yes, we use the term brokenness, folks, because it's not healthy sexuality. Tell us one of a fascinating story of a person you counseled who came out of sexual sin and into wholesomeness. Tell us one of your stories.
Oh, there's so many. I've got 2 men I'm thinking of right now that are like, they're both businessmen, and they are not identified in the world. And they're 2 men that the world would consider like models. And they both have like beautiful trophy wives. And they have, one of them has 3 kids, and the other one is leading up a successful business. And both of these men and their wives and children, they're just thriving. And this has been going on for years, almost now for over 15 years of success with these 2 particular people. But one of the men were completely gay identified, lived as a homosexual. The other man struggled in the church secretly. and they were actually best friends. And I think they were on a trajectory of uncleanness. And then God, just did this miraculous work in their couple of years here in this ministry. And now, I mean, they're both predominant leaders in their communities. And so I see this a lot. The gay activists out there, the naysayers, would say these people don't exist. Well, they don't exist to them because they don't know the hundreds of people that I know.
Right.
And
I call it focus on the failures. People like Wayne Bessent, who's a sort of a nasty homosexual activist. He's the one who coined he coined the nickname Porno Pete for me and slandered me. It's just ridiculous. But Wayne goes around saying there's no such thing as ex-gays. And so what he does is every time there's a failure, every time there's somebody who maybe was once an ex-gay identified person who falls back into the lifestyle or whatever, they say, see, you can't change. But of course, for every one of those guys, there's who knows how many people who've walked out who aren't public figures. And then there's people like you. I mean, the reality is thousands and thousands. We can't know how many people, only God knows, people have come out of this thing because it's a behavioral issue. It's not who you are. That's what drives me the craziest the most, Stephen, when the LGBTQ side says, this is who you are. This is how you're defined. This sin, basically.
Could I jump in and ask Stephen a question, make a quick comment, Pete?
Sure.
So I think, Stephen, and maybe you could react to this, that the biggest mistake Christianity has made, broadly defined, Roman Catholic and Protestant in America over the last 30 to 40 years, in reacting to the idea that homosexuality is a good thing. When it comes specifically to politics, this is wonderful hearing about your success in the counseling chamber where things are rightfully private.
Right.
But with respect to Christianity reacting to the idea, again, that homosexuality is a legal good, a political good, the mistake that we've made is to conflate the private or the counseling chamber and this discussion that we're having right now, which is so fruitful and so helpful and so loving and so eye-opening, to conflate this with the law and with politics, which I think, and I'll close with this comment, should be very simple. The law should be very simple. It's wrong. It should be illegal. What should be illegal? Well, I think it's best if the law says sex outside of marriage is illegal. And then if people want to do it, if they end up doing it privately, whatever, it's a private thing and whatever, the law has to have permutations with respect to that in terms of discipline. But am I off on the wrong track there?
You're really not. And the intervention and the overreach of the law is draconian in that it would try to stop therapists and counselors and this whole conversion therapy ruse, and the idea that because people are not successful. I mean, if we had that same kind of logic with alcoholism or with drug abuse, we would be in a world of hurt with a lot of hurting people.
Okay, so hold on a sec. Back up where you're saying. So people at the law, there's activists who are successfully trying to ban, for example, if you were a therapist and not a counselor, they're going to try to ban you someday as well. To ban you from helping a minor boy, say, for example, a 15-year-old boy whose parents and him together, they don't want him to embrace a gay identity. That is banned effectively in many states now.
That's right. And what really people, I haven't seen very many people actually connect the dots to that politically, the agenda behind that. What happens when you stop counseling for children and for teenagers who are sexually confused? This is nothing but recruitment of the LGBTQ. They want these fresh young people to come into their community and embrace a mindset that they cannot change. That's nothing but recruitment of children and teenagers. And it needs to be said, and let me just finish with this. This whole idea that the government would come in into counseling and therapy and say, no, you can't do that because these LGBT people are harmed by it. You don't ever get the actual therapists or the locations or these people. And where are all these hurting, people that have been tortured by counseling and therapy? You can't find them. You find the Sam Brighton, whatever his name is, guy, but then we find out he's a liar.
Well, yeah, there's been lots of lies told. Chris Doyle's written a whole book about it. Christopher Doyle, he wrote an excellent paper too, and so ironically, what Mike, you alluded to, sort of like the sodomy law issue, which is it's a lot of people on both sides of that one. I don't think you're ever going to see a sodomy law passed in New York City, of course, but ironically, what's happened is instead of banning sodomy laws, and of course, there were very few prosecutions under that. What's happened is that it's been displaced. Now they're banning getting out of homosexuality. And so again, we see, I mean, it seems one of the most important verses on this issue from the Bible is really Isaiah 5:20, because everything is completely flipped. And so now you see the same people who say, oh my goodness, there was once a sodomy law in the United States, anti-sodomy laws struck down by the Supreme Court, after they had upheld it 17 years or earlier, which is very interesting. But these same people are effectively now saying, no, we're going to use the law to ban leaving homosexuality. And it's much like abortion. Rather than doctors protecting unborn life, now you see the law protecting those who would systematically destroy unborn life. And America really is in a perilous place because we have chosen in so many ways to just reject God, and not just reject God, but to do evil things like, abortion on demand. New York State just passed, I think, the strongest abortion law in the country.
There's a legal, I used to say all the time when I was at the Christian Civic League of Maine that what we're being forced to accept politically and philosophically, culturally, morally, religiously, is the idea that all sex is good sex as long as it's consensual. And that's a very bad idea, especially in law. That's a very, very bad idea. And now look at what we're at. Look at where we're at. We're fighting over whether or not the government should ban counseling for children.
Yeah, and it's not just children, because I think, is California already passed one, Stephen, or have they passed it for adults as well in California?
They tried to. They pulled it at the last minute. It would have passed probably because they're Democrat controlled. Representative Lee was trying to pass AB 2943, which would have made it illegal based upon consumer fraud laws, I mean, this is a no-brainer. Those laws were never, ever meant to be on issues of faith and or issues of self-determination in counseling. It's ridiculous to think that we would use consumer fraud laws. Bottom line, if there's no tomatoes in the can, then that's fraud. When it says tomatoes on the can, it's not on issues of faith and self-determination about what people want to do with the internal world of their feelings and thoughts. And so this is really
totalitarian. It's totalitarian, Stephen. Right. It's the government dictating which lifestyles are acceptable.
Exactly right.
And so where are the libertarians? Where are the people who care about liberty? Where's the Republican Party? Now let's remember, guys, I think it's 3 states. Susana Martinez, a former governor of New Mexico, Chris Christie in New Jersey, and Illinois Governor Bruce Rauner, he just got thrown out. And there may be another Republican governor, I think maybe in New Hampshire. These are Republican governors who signed this legislation, which stops the pursuit of pro-heterosexual therapy for minors. Let's think about that. It's not just the Democrats; it's the Republicans who are just all about media. They're listening to the power brokers. That sometimes you have major Republican donors who are saying, look, we will not give to the Republican Party if you if you have an anti-gay agenda. And so we're seeing this phenomenon now where after 50 years of in-your-face gay activism, because that's what Stonewall represented. Stonewall was the Stonewall Inn in New York City. This is the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall romantically called the Stonewall Rebellion by gay activists. It was basically an anti-police riot and was pretty nasty. I mean, they were throwing bottles at the police. I believe they trapped the police inside the bar at one point. This was a nasty riot. This has nothing in common with Selma. One of the greatest scams of the century is that the homosexual movement robbed the real civil rights movement, which is African Americans. We as Americans should be proud of our efforts to end Jim Crow and to fight against racism. That's a good thing. This is the Stonewall, the gay revolution, is a horrible development in America, and it's 50 years. And look where we are after 50 years. We're effectively banning the outreach of Judeo-Christian teaching on this issue, Stephen.
Yeah, it's upside down, like you said in Isaiah, calling good evil and evil good. And that's why we need instruction. We need hope. And, the public needs to know that we're going to do that. You and I are going to do that along with another team of people and offering a conference here in Oklahoma City to actually lay out some of these things, give hope on understanding how we got to where we are and where we can go when we look at history and revival. And if people will really be courageous enough to say enough is enough, and we need God's voice, not the revoicing of the church.
Yeah. Now, Jared, pull up godsvoice.us. And Stephen, I have an important question to ask you about what you would tell a teenager. But first, explain what God's Voice is reacting to. This is about LGBTQ positive Christianity, where we recognize people who are homosexually and transgender or bisexually identified and affirm them as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, even though we would not sanction their practicing the behavior. That makes no sense to me. Explain what this is all about.
Well, you had an erosion that was taking place within the evangelical circles in the Gospel Coalition, in the PCA, with this mentoring of this idea of orientation. Mark Yarhouse's paper that came out in 2010 to start teaching these young seminarians and Bible teachers who are actually struggling with same-sex attraction, that basically their orientation isn't going to change. It was an announcement in 2012 by Alan Chambers that said 99.9% of people don't change. So now
because Alan is so turned in that he just knew the thoughts, and Alan Chambers knew the hearts of 99.9%. I mean, the hubris of that guy, taking down a Christian ministry and spouting these lies. I mean, where did he get that number that virtually everybody who tries to change can't change? I mean, had he interviewed thousands of people, Alan Chambers?
Well, what's ironic about Alan is he never did any kind of study and practice with the whole therapy, the trauma issue. And then, he sets up in an office that actually is supposed to be a networking office, hardly did any of the actual hands-on ministries for years and understanding how to really help souls. And he himself, in his own admission and some of the things that went on in that office, struggling with pornography and identity conflict, and then comes out now he's a gay Christian mixed orientation marriage, Mark Yarhouse's language, and
explain what that is to people. What is a mixed orientation marriage?
Well, that's just it. They're now promoting Revoice, which was Nate Collins, right under Albert Mohler, coming right out of his seminary 2 months before he left, planning this whole conference. 2 months later, you have a conference in St. Louis where they're going to revoice the church with new terminology called sexual minorities, legitimizing LGBTQ plus, and the plus sign people need to pay attention to what that really is. And you've got this mixture of the APA mindset that even now they're actually propagating the idea of lowering consent laws, YAPs and MAPs, which are...
Hold on, I gotta identify that. APA is the American Psychiatric Association. MAPS is a new term called minor attracted persons. It's a politically correct term for essentially adults who are sexually attracted to minors, to children. And of course, once you start studying it and then you start sympathy, this is how the whole gay movement got mainstream. First you study it, and then you start, there's a sympathy, and then you call for tolerance, and then pretty soon it's very aggressive. And so our conference, godsvoice.us, folks, you can go to godsvoice.us, and this is February 22nd, 23rd. Stephen is one of the major speakers. I'll be speaking. I'm going to be talking about how this whole idea of a sexual minority, this was a Harry Hayes invention back in the 1940s and 50s. This is nothing new. Why would the church go along with the idea of positively embracing the idea of a minority based on a sinful sexual identity? And so it's all crazy. But Stephen, we're running out of time, so let me cut back to. I want you to. I'm a teenage boy. I'm 14 years old. I've got same-sex attraction. I think I'm gay. My parents bring me into your counseling. They said, Stephen, could you help us? What do you tell a young boy about this issue when he comes into counseling at First Stone Ministries?
Well, that's actually a really good question, because we're accused of really harming and torturing the youth. And actually what we do is we try to befriend them and see if they really even want to be here. And if their mindset is just in total rebellion to even being here, and with their idea of their parents bringing here, we don't meet with them. We tell the parents and the family it's counterproductive, and we assure the young person that we will be here for them if they would like to hear truth that's come from our own lives and the lives of many other people. So we share the testimony, we share the existence of God, to hopefully that a youth person would actually begin to kind of process the idea of the creation, male and female, and just start from the beginnings. And then from there, if they actually do embrace and want help, we've actually seen, matter of fact, last year, there were 5 young people that came through our ministry under the age of 18 that completely surrendered their lives to Jesus. One of the young men, he was mad and angry, and the parents insisted that he come here a couple of visits. And after the second visit, he finally said, you guys have really given me a lot to think about. And he came on his own. And by the end of a year and a half of visiting with him, he finally got to a place where he's going, I never really was gay. I was just confused. And he came to that conclusion all on his own. And he is now in college, and he's doing really, really well. And those stories are multiplied many times, because if a young person who's not acted out and has not been in the claws of the LGBTQ, then they actually have a greater success rate in really finding lasting freedom. And that's the thing that people are not identifying with these conversion therapy laws. It'd be nice to be able to sit down with Chris Christie and actually process this with him. No doubt the man in his obesity has probably had trauma in his own life, and should be able to compassionately care about why people are hurting, and behind the scenes story of the trauma of LGBTQ youth. These people need help and hope.
But what actually happened was there were a lot of lies, I think, and that was the New Jersey bill, which, remember, Governor Chris Christie, a Republican, signed. And the lies, we can't even get into them here, Stephen. We don't have time. But again, even to this day, you have homosexual activists like Joe Jervis, who runs the Joe My God website. Every time he writes about this, he calls them torture. He says conversion therapy torture, like you're out there, burning hot wax on. I mean, it's so ridiculous. This is talk therapy, and as you said, you don't even welcome people who don't want to be there. But there's no media to answer these lies. They're all on the side of the gay activists.
They used to always fight against the born gay issue. Now they say we don't care. We want our rights anyhow. And, they used to fight, same thing with abortion. They used to just call it a fetus and that it was a blob of tissue. We know better now. This is going to come around and really bite the butts of lots of people in the future, that this is a reality, that people are not born gay, and that this is an environmental issue, and this is a propagation of the deepest, darkest kind of immorality.
And Stephen, your website again is firststone.org. If anybody needs help, go First Stone. You're also affiliated with Restored Hope Network, which is an umbrella group which we replaced Exodus, which helps people out of the lifestyle. Thank you for being our guest. We're going to have you back someday because I think you're really in the forefront of these efforts to help people out of homosexuality. Stephen, you're a hero, one of my heroes, because you helped expose Alan Chambers. You are the balance of the truth and the compassion. You've got it all. And I think that's something that people need to know. And you're out there for anybody who needs help. If you're a parent and your son or your daughter struggles, there's Restored Hope Network, there's First Stone, there's people who can help. Don't buy the lie. Stephen, one last word from you about this lie that this is who you are. Being gay is who you are. We know that's a lie, but the media treats it as if it's true.
Well, bottom line, God created them in the image of male and female, and we're created in God's image, and that does not include all the distortions and the wildness that you see in the LGBTQ community. And those are hurting people, they're broken people, they're deceived people, and they really do need help and deliverance and freedom. That's what we're about. The God's Voice Conference will be about hope and giving hope. I'm going to be presenting biblical truth, and some of the other speakers will be presenting other types of truth and biblical truth that all surrounds the idea that God is speaking to us to call our nation back to repentance and the church to repentance on this issue.
Well, thank you for all you've done, Stephen. I'm so grateful that you're my friend and that you are out there doing God's work. Mike, take us back to the Miracle for Truth.
You're my friend too, no matter what those ridiculous, immature people say in the
past. Yeah, you can't worry about what homosexual activists say. Go ahead, Mike.
Hey, Pete, we finished 2 full weeks of shows. Congratulations. It's awesome. You're doing great work. We're looking forward to 5 more shows starting on Monday, and that's at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, noon Central Time. Pete will be back home. He's traveling. That's why the background isn't quite as pretty as the one that he has when he's home. But do join us. Go to the donate page. Make sure that you say a prayer for Americans for Truth. And we are going to be giving the truth out every day, every weekday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time here
and
at
also
AmericansForTruth.com.
Yes, and also sign up for our email newsletter. We'll be getting you'll get notice about the shows and everything else we're doing, folks. And remember the God's Voice Conference, godsvoice.us, February 22nd, 23rd in Oklahoma City. Stephen's done a lot of work on that. And again, everybody, thank you for watching. I'm enjoying the show. I hope you are too. I heard from a listener in the Netherlands, I believe it was today, where people watching all over the world. Remember, it's your duty as a Christian or an American citizen or wherever you are to defend God's truth about homosexuality, because it's his truth, not ours. We'll see you next week. Thank you.